This is actually take 2 of recording this episode because, of course, something always has to go wrong, right? And this is entirely my fault. I did not check. This has already happened with one episode before, but I did not check to see if my phone was plugged in or if it had enough battery to record an entire podcast episode without the camera dying, right? Of course, I record the entire episode without checking to see if the camera was going because I had pressed record, but at the end of the episode, I hit the stop recording button on my laptop for the audio. I get up and I look at my phone and the screen is black. And I'm like, why the fuck is the screen black? And it turns out that my idiot self didn't plug it in and it was at like 20% battery, I think at the time. I remember thinking, oh shit, it was at 20% and I didn't plug it in. So it died like in the middle of recording. And the video that I did have of the episode cut out halfway through the episode. So I'm not going to release another episode like that. That was a super annoying thing to go through when I had my episode with Andy. And of course, I feel like I kind of did him dirty there. Like I didn't give him the full opportunity to be in an episode that was actually like a good one just because like the video cut out halfway through. So that was really frustrating. Growing pains. I can't afford a new camera because, they go for like $2,600 and I can't justify that big of a purchase on a podcast that doesn't really have an income yet, or it doesn't have an income yet. This is purely passion as of right now. So anyways, if you are a longtime viewer of the show, of this podcast, you will notice two things are different. The first is that I'm not drinking anything except for water, right? I got my water here just to help my throat because I'm going to be talking by myself today. The second is that I'm not drinking anything. Usually I have a guest on and we partake in consuming alcoholic beverages, but this time I'm by myself and I'm drinking nothing but water. Both of these are related actually, funny enough, because I just got back from a 9-day trip to the UK and it was basically 9 days of binge drinking, if I'm being quite honest with you. I don't think I went a single day without consuming some form of alcohol, which is probably not the best thing to admit on a public forum, but you know what? I'm going to own it. Those were my decisions that I made just because of the fact that I was when in Rome and when in England, you got to drink, right? Surprisingly, I thought it wasn't going to be as much of a beer country as I did. I guess that shows how little I knew about the country and its culture. But it was a lot more beer than I had thought, which again, I have no problem with it. I drank a couple pints, more than a couple pints. A couple gin and tonics and stuff like that. But this episode is basically going to just be me talking about my trip, the ups and downs, the highlights and the lowlights, all that good stuff and everything in between. So planning the trip was really interesting because I'm 23 and this is the first time that I'd gone on a trip that I'd completely planned for myself. Well, not for myself. Like I did it with my girlfriend, but my parents were basically not involved. I didn't have mommy and daddy there to hold my hand, walk me through the process. And especially this is special to me because this is the first trip that I funded by myself, completely for myself, right? Which is a nice bucket list thing to check off. And it's also a very privileged thing to say because like I realize that a lot of people, not only aren't a lot of people not able to go on trips, but let alone go on trips that their parents have paid for them up until they're 23 years old. So it's a little pathetic, I guess, to admit that, but it is what it is. I'll own up to that as well. So basically, yeah, planning the trip was really interesting. Looking for things, trying to ball on a budget, all that good stuff. The trip itself was divided up into, I would say, 3 legs. 2 countries, 3 legs. So we visited the UK in general, and obviously the UK is made up of Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales, right? We only went to 2 of those countries. So we went to England and Scotland. But the reason I say 3 legs is because it was divided up into 3 different and distinct locations. So the first one is London. The second trip, the middle leg of the trip was the Highlands, specifically the Isle of Skye, which is in Scotland. Beautiful place. That was more nature. And then back to a city part in Edinburgh, whatever. The locals pronounce it very differently. I got shat on a couple times by locals because of the fact that I was saying Edinburgh, which is not what locals say at all, which is another awesome little cultural lesson that I learned while I was there. So those are the 3 legs. Then, of course, we returned back to London to fly out of Heathrow back to New York City. So those are the 3 legs of the trip. That's how I would divide it up. I'm going to walk you through so first day, right? We land in London. We decide to, because we are trying to maximize our time while doing like touristy things and just, maximize our vacation time. We decided to book a flight that landed in London at 8:15 in the morning or 9:15 in the morning. So we took a red eye. It was an overnight flight. So after work on a Friday, my girlfriend and I left to go to JFK in New York City and then fly from 10:15 at night and land 9:15 their time. They're 4 hours ahead of us. It was like a 7-hour and change flight. So we land. No, not a wink of sleep for me on the plane. I'm relatively tall as it is. I would say I'm taller than the average guy. I'm 6'4", and the planes. This is the last time I'm fucking flying American Airlines. The last time, because their economy class is so bad. Like when I sat down, the back of the chair in front of me was already hitting my knees, like pressed up against, right? And I'm not sitting back in the chair and like scooting my hips forward. None of that. Like my ass is firmly against the back of the chair, my chair, and my knees are still just pressed up against this thing. So that was a fucking nightmare from the start. And if that's not bad enough, the little like armrest on the aisle, because I was in the aisle seat, the armrest on the aisle side of the seat was not like liftable. So it's just a stationary thing. So you can't jut your leg out because it's there in the way. So it's like poking the side of your thigh. Super fucking frustrating. But this is again, privilege problems, whatever. So I didn't sleep at all. Me and my girlfriend didn't sleep at all. We arrived the next day in London and we are so exhausted. Obviously it was like, at that point we'd been up for, I believe, over 24 hours. No sleep on the plane. The food is, airline food, whatever. And we land, and the check-in time for our hotel is not until 3 p.m. So we go from Heathrow all the way to our hotel, which was in the Fitzrovia area in London. If you're familiar, that's like north of the center of the city. So it was a really good area, but check-in time wasn't until 3. So we're like, what the fuck are we going to do for, I think it was 4 hours at that point. So we decide to just leave our bags. We go out, and the first thing I wanted to do was try Nando's, because there was a Nando's right by the hotel. And that's like one of the bucket list things. I have to go to Nando's because everybody talks about Nando's. And if you're not familiar, it's like a South African, like Chick-fil-A, but not really it's just a South African chain restaurant that's like a step above McDonald's. It's not quite that level of fast food. Like it's better than that. So we go to a Nando's that opens at 11. So we're inside Nando's, we're eating. It was great food, the peri-peri sauce, all that stuff. It lived up to the hype, I think. It was very satisfying to eat there. And then afterwards, we're like, well, what the fuck are we going to do for another like 3.5 hours? We decide to just go and shop in Soho. So that's like a 15-minute walk south from Fitzrovia. So we walk and we're like exhausted. We literally look like walking corpses. We haven't showered in like fucking forever. And like we're wearing like, like when you step in an airplane, the second you step in an airport, actually, you just get greasy. It's the most disgusting thing. And then over the flight, the grease factor just grows by 10 exponentially every single hour that goes by. You just get way greasier and just nasty and whatever. You just feel gross. Well, we had been traveling for several hours, and then now we're walking in the streets of London. We look like beat up, like homeless people. We're down bad. And we're just walking around trying to shop. We walk into stores. I'm like falling asleep while sitting, waiting for her to like try on stuff. Like I didn't really want to try on clothes because I was too lazy to like move. I was so tired. And I'm literally like nodding off. Like while I'm sitting up, like waiting for her to get changed, I'm going like that. Like, like the little neck jerks, because I'm literally falling asleep while sitting down. We power through it. All right. We get back to the hotel room. Usually people advise not to take a nap when you're jet lagged, especially in a different time zone, because you'll just fucking knock out. And then that's like a whole 2 days gone, because the next day you're going to be tired because you go to sleep that night at an awful time in their local time, whatever. But we ended up napping for, I would say, 2.5 hours, and we wake up because we checked in at 3, so we ended up napping for around 2.5 hours. We wake up around like 5:36. We get ready. We're out the door by 7, so it was like a decent time. And we go to, that night we went to have Dishoom, which this was probably one of the highlights of the trip overall. Like one of the top 5 moments, I would say. Maybe top 6. It was the best Indian food I've ever had in my entire life. Let me preface this by saying, going into this trip, I did not expect the food to be good at all, because you hear the stereotypes, right? Like that London and the UK in general is not known for like delicacies and like to be the best cuisine in the world, right? Like it's not known for that. It's known for other things. So I was going into, and I'm a huge foodie, so I was going into this trip just being like, all right, I'm just gonna expect the fucking food to be bland as fuck, and like as if they have never heard of like seasonings and salt before, right? Funny enough, I mean, I should have known better. This is Indian food, and obviously Indian food is a huge thing in the UK for unfortunate reasons, but that happens to be the case. So when we went there, I should have expected to have like really good Indian food. And I had my hopes were a little high because, right, like you hear like of the Indian food, the reputation of Indian food in the UK, but this was by far the best Indian food I've ever had in my life. And I live in New York, so I've had like great Indian spots, and I love Indian cuisine is one of my top favorite cuisines, and I've had a lot of Indian food. This was by far, hands down, bar none, the best Indian food I've ever had. Yo, the hype is real. Lamb, curry, chicken tikka masala for obvious reasons. Got to try the classics. Cheese-filled naan. We're getting garlic naan and the rice is coming up. God damn, this shit's good. And Dishoom is a like, it's not a, I don't want to say chain because chain makes it sound bad, but it's like there's several locations scattered throughout the UK. There's like a couple locations in, I don't know if there's a couple, but there's definitely one in Edinburgh because we had it again there in Scotland. So they're in Scotland. They're all over, England. So it was amazing. Like I loved the food. The flavors were fucking crazy. Like it was such like intense flavor profiles. Like usually, so we had to get chicken tikka masala because we're basic as fuck. But usually chicken tikka masala is like a little more like creamier because it's like a yogurt based sauce, right? This one nailed it perfectly where it wasn't too yogurty, but it wasn't just straight up tomato sauce. It was like that perfect balance. And the flavor, I keep coming back to, it was just, I can't even describe it. Like my mouth is watering right now thinking of that fucking dish. And the chicken was so tender, you could straight up just put the piece in your mouth and then press it with your tongue against the roof of your mouth and it would just melt, like disintegrate. It was insane. Like I've never had Indian food like that. So that was like crazy. That blew our socks off. That's a great way to start off the night. Earlier that morning, we were cranky, like giving each other attitude because we were just fucking tired. But that night was crazy. Second day comes, and we go from London to Oxford. Oxford, the food was lackluster in Oxford. I ain't even gonna lie. Like that shit was not anything to go, ranting about or like anything to brag about. Or it was just very subpar. It was very mid. I had my first, it was a Sunday when we had gone to Oxford. That was the second day of the trip because we landed on Saturday morning. So Sunday, obviously another thing on my bucket list is to have a Sunday roast because that's a traditional English thing, right? It's a very traditional British thing to have a Sunday roast. So I'm like, I gotta fucking have this. So we go to a pub or a tavern. Ceilings were, I don't know when this thing was built. It had to have been in like the fucking, I don't know, like 1200s or something. I mean, the ceilings were so low that my head was like fully this much in like an area of clearance where there was like wooden beams that were supporting like the roof or whatever, where they were running. There was like, obviously a little more clearance. The beams came down to like the middle of my face. So like, it's like so low. I was like this already in the one area of clearance. I stood up and it's like this. So it's like 6 foot clearance, which is crazy. Like it was so low. So the tavern's tiny. There's, bartenders working behind this like little roundabout bar and there's just like beers and local like brews or whatever the fuck. So I'm like, let me just get your local, like a pint of your local shit. And I'll have the, I think I had lamb. Yeah, I had lamb Sunday roast. It was okay. Yorkshire pudding. I went into it thinking it was going to be like a puddingy, like something, like not a piece of bread. It's basically literally, it almost feels like just like puff pastry / like pie crust, like a weird in between. I don't know why they call it pudding, which was like really weird to me, but I had that. It was okay. The lamb roast was good. I mean, all of it was good. It just wasn't like spectacular, right? And I had that with a pint. And then after that, we went around. And then the highlight of the Oxford trip was definitely the architecture. The architecture in the area was incredible. I mean, obviously it's a very old city, and we had gone and we knew locals. My girlfriend was friends with locals there. So they toured us throughout the entire city. It's a smaller city, so you could get the entire city done, like seeing everything in one day, which was great. So we went, we toured the whole place, saw all the universities, all the colleges of the University of Oxford, which was amazing because I don't know if you know this or not, but basically Oxford University isn't like a single entity. It's kind of Oxford University refers to the collective colleges that reside in the city of Oxford. So that's like the umbrella term for all of the colleges that are in the city. So I didn't know that. They educated me on that. We were walking around. We're looking at this beautiful architecture. Like it's like this sandstone material. It's very old looking. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And we had been blessed with like the best weather possible. Like I'm literally talking like, England is very known for having like rainy, shitty weather. And for some reason, the week that we went, over the course of actually the 9 days in total, like including in Scotland too, the entire area of the UK just was blessed with perfect weather the entire time we were there. We're talking like 55, sunshine, just beautiful, like a light breeze so you don't get too hot, but you're not too cold because it's 55. It was perfect. So we were walking around Oxford. I'm looking at this amazing architecture. And then we stopped by for, again, a very British thing, G&Ts, gin and tonics. So we go to this pub and there's like people, it's like beautiful out there. There's people just enjoying their Sundays, like drinking with each other. So I ordered a 57% alcohol gin. So it was 114 proof. That shit was fucking strong. It was crazy. And then after being like buzzed, we're walking around more, seeing like the architecture. And it's crazy how the environment will shape the way you think. I felt as though I could calculate pi to like the last precise digit, or like I would be able to crack like problems that have been very historically known throughout academia, just because I was standing in a place that was known for its like intelligence and its like long-standing reputation of being, one of the top universities in the world, or like educational areas in the world. So I was just feeling so smart walking through. This place was just so stupid. And then after Oxford, we go back to London. And then the next day is the day after, we did all the touristy shit. We saw Big Ben, the London Bridge. We saw the London Eye from far, but we didn't go on it just because like you pay like 30 pounds to get inside of a pod. And then like all of the 30 minutes, because it's a 30-minute loop, the whole 30 minutes, the majority of it is done within the first 5. You go up to a certain height where you could see like the whole layout of the city. And then for the rest of the 20 minutes, like, what are you doing? You're just sitting in a thing, just waiting for it to get to the end. So we didn't really see a point in doing that. Sorry if you're a local Londoner watching this and you're offended by that, but there was really no point. So we didn't end up doing that. Excuse me. So yeah, it was great. We got all the touristy shit done. And then the next day, we ended up going to the next leg of the trip, which is one of my favorites, which was Scotland. We had flown out from Gatwick Airport, which is one of the worst fucking airports I've ever been to, if I'm being quite honest, because in the US, like the terminals to the airport is arranged in a way where it's like minimizing the amount of walking that the traveler has to do, meaning the gates are like, a lot of the times they'll be in like a rounded like half circle. So there's gates scattered across like the half circle, and there's like different branches. So like gates 10 to 20 are this way, gates 20 to 30 are that way, gates 30 to 40 are that way, right? So it's like in a very localized area and there's not much walking. Well, Gatwick, for whatever reason, is set up in a way where gates fucking 20 to 50, so 30 gates, are all in this single stretch of just like building, and you have to just walk in one direction. I swear. And the worst part was the fact that we did not plan or give ourselves enough time. So my girlfriend and I were literally sprinting from the moment we woke up, got ready, got outside, checked out of the hotel. The moment we checked out, we were running with fucking check bags, or me, because my girlfriend's not going to carry her bag. So I'm walking around like out over here looking like a bellboy, carrying like 60 pounds worth of luggage, sprinting, just holding these things, running through the city, getting into public transportation, getting all the way down to Gatwick. And we didn't give ourselves enough time. We end up getting our, checking in our luggage, getting our bag, and we have to sprint. Now, this whole stretch of just building, which was, I swear, I feel like I was running like / jogging for like 6 minutes, 7 minutes straight, which doesn't sound like a long time, but if you're running in a building for 7 minutes straight in one direction, going like 5 miles per hour. If I had to like eyeball it, if I had to estimate it, that's a long time. Like, how much building is there left to run? Like, I've been sprinting for what feels like a fucking marathon. Like, it made no sense. We finally get there. We were literally the last ones to get on the plane. We get on the plane. We fly to Inverness, which is the smallest airport I've ever been to in my life. There's one baggage claim carousel. That's how small it is. There's like one gate, and we get out. We get the car, and now this is where things got really interesting because Inverness is like 3 hours away from where we were staying in the Isle of Skye. So we had to drive there. Obviously, the Isle of Skye, there's not much public transportation in the Highlands. It's like a very rural area, so we have to drive. Now, driving was very interesting because, as a lot of people know, in the States, we drive on the right side of the road, but the driver's on the left side of the car. That is such a mind fuck. Completely flopping, like switching that, where you're driving on the left side of the road but the right side of the car. It is actually way more difficult than I had anticipated. I think I would consider myself a pretty decent driver. So I was thinking, oh, when I get there and we get the car, it's going to be like an easy peasy thing. Like, we just get the car and you just drive, and yeah, it's going to be a little difficult, a little weird to get used to, but it's just the other side of the road. It's not going to be much different. No, all of your instincts as a driver in the US are completely toyed with when you completely swap the situation around. So when you're driving, you're used to having the right side of your view being the majority. Like, all of this is open space when you're driving on the left side of the car, right? So because you're used to all this being your open space, you're used to looking and paying attention to things and like basically from here to here. Because on this side, it's just a window and it's the door frame. So there's not much in like the windshield that you're looking through, the front windshield that you have to look out for. When you're driving in the UK, it's the exact opposite. So here, all of a sudden, you feel like sensory deprivation because your field of view is used to being a certain way. Now it's cut off on this side, and there's way too much stimulus from this field of view. And I was sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, like all my instincts are wrong. If I go to change a gear, I use my right hand to go reach over to my right side. Nope, I would hit the door. Now it's on my left side. If I want to look behind me, the rearview mirror, I'm used to looking up to my right. Nope, now it's on the other side. It's on the left. So it's like super freaky trying to get all this down while navigating local traffic. And it's a city. Like where we landed in Inverness, it's a city. It's not like a fucking, the bumblefuck. It's a small city, but it's still a city. So there's a lot of traffic and pedestrians, cyclists, other drivers that you're having to look out for while you're freaking driving. So it was a pretty intense, I would say, introduction to driving in the UK. Not as intense if it would have been like if we had rented a car in London. Thank God we did not do that, because I know for a fucking fact I would have crashed, because it's way too overwhelming. So we ended up, renting the car. We're driving. We're freaking out. All three. I should mention, it was me, my girlfriend, and at the time a friend of my girlfriend's, but now a friend of ours, because I got along great with him. So we were all going together in the Isle of Skye, and we're freaking out because we landed in Scotland. Once we had gone outside of Inverness, it's all just like rural landscapes and beautiful rolling hills and mountains, and it's Scotland. So we're flipping out. We're like, oh my God, whatever. And now we're on this 3-hour, trip all the way up to the Isle of Skye, where we were staying in Staffin, that's the town that we were staying in, which is located in like the northeast coast of this small island, the Isle of Skye. I don't actually know if it's an island, but I digress. So that's where we had gone to, 3 hours, right? We're driving the 3 hours from Inverness to Scotland. And I swear to God, this is where I learned a couple things about Scotland/Scottish people. Drivers are motherfucking crazy. Like, I'm used to New York drivers in the city. I'm used to city drivers, aggressive, like, oh, fucking honking, all this shit, asshole cab drivers, all that fun stuff. But they are just aggressive and mean. Whereas Scottish drivers, I would say, are literally playing with their lives, especially in the Highlands. I'm not exaggerating. So I'll explain. We arrive in the Highlands, okay? You're used to driving with 2 lanes, right? On a like 2-way road. We're driving on the left side, and there's obviously the other side of the road where cars are coming in the oncoming direction, right? They're traveling in the opposite direction. All of a sudden, when we get to the Isle of Skye, or like in the Highland area, the more rural parts of Scotland, the fucking road system just completely disappears. You're talking like two-way roads, right? Randomly will just convert into a one-way. And it's not like, oh, there's like shoulders where you could put, it's like the road just converges into a one-way with no signs, by the way. There's nothing to tell you, by the way, look out, it's a one-way ahead. Nothing. It's just like, boom, all of a sudden it's a one-way, a bottleneck. And on either side of you, it'll either be like, at times, a cliff, like straight up just cliff, or worse, like a ditch where your tires, if they get in there, are just going to get fucked. You're going to jack up your suspension and all that. I'm not like a mechanic, but all of the parts that are important in a car will just get fucked up. I know, for going into that ditch. It's a deep ditch, right? Or just trees and like vegetation, right? So we're driving probably, not to mention the roads are curvy and windy as fuck. Like literally, the speed limit was saying 60 miles per hour on Google Maps. And that's what some of the signs said in the area. I was going 45 because I wasn't comfortable going 60 miles per hour because it's so curvy and windy and it's like hills and vegetation that you can't see more than, I would say, like maybe 100 feet in front of your car, right? You can't see past that. So traveling 60 miles per hour, if you go around a curve and there's a car all of a sudden on the, like, who's a little too in your lane or whatever, because the lanes themselves are actually, I didn't mention this, ridiculously narrow. You're talking like typical US lane, cut that down by a third. So you're left with 2/3 of your US lane in Scotland. That's one lane. Like that's your normal lane. It's so tight. So when you're taking a curve going fast, you don't know if like the person's going to be in slightly in your lane. All of a sudden you get like, you skim them, like you like, scrape against them or whatever. So I'm not going fast because I'm not comfortable. And all of a sudden where we encountered, you're just going and the road converges into one. We almost actually got in an accident because I had been driving at that point for, I would say like an hour and 45 minutes. So I got tired of driving and, my girlfriend and our friend, they wanted to, take a crack at driving because we had so much driving to do over the next 3 days in Scotland that it wouldn't make sense for me to just be driving the entire time. So they wanted to learn and get used to, the mechanics of driving on the, opposite side of the car, on the opposite side of the road, whatever. So I switched off and I shit you not, the second I gave the steering wheel to my girlfriend, obviously Hannah, she had some difficulties, but the moment I'm referring to is when we let our friend get behind the steering wheel. He fucking takes off not 2 minutes into driving. Now we're in like bumblefuck Scotland. Like if our car breaks down, we're like, we don't know what number to call. And if we do call a number, we're expecting help in maybe an hour and 15. Like we're just sitting on the side. It's the middle of nowhere, okay? So and it's just open road and mountains. So we're going, he gets in the car, he starts driving. All of a sudden, again, this fucking one way just comes out of nowhere, but it's at the, like, just around a curve. And of course, just our luck, it converges into a one way on a bridge, a very narrow bridge with stone walls on either side. And as we pull up to it, he's going way faster than he should have been. He's going like fucking 45, and we pull up to it and we see a giant truck, not an 18-wheeler, but like a Mack truck, like a semi-truck, like going through this bridge. So he slams on the brake, turns to get into the shoulder because there's little pullover areas where there are these sudden one-ways. But because he was going so fast, like he kind of estimated how hard he had to turn. Whatever happened. And what I do remember is the fact that we went off the road and now the car's just going like this and we're fucking vibrating, shit's shaking. It was just crazy, right? We brake and I immediately just say, I'm in the backseat at this point. I'm like, all right, let me drive. Like, I was just so petrified because the car was also under my name. So I'm like, fuck, I don't want this to I'm going to have to pay $2,000 or some bullshit fees or whatever from the car rental service because we damaged the car. So we end up braking. He ends up braking, swerving out of the way. Thank God he did that because if he hadn't have done that, one of two things happened. He either just would have gone head on into the truck and we could have died, or he would have just hit the stone wall. So he did react in time and in an appropriate manner. It was just rough. The situation was rough. So he pulls over. I'm like, fucking like, what just happened? So I get in the passenger now and in the driver's seat now, and we start driving, and it is taking so long to get there because we're going way under the speed limit. It now turns to night. And again, because it's bumba fuck Scotland, there's no road lights. There's no like lamps, nothing, none of that. It is straight up nighttime and just headlight. That's it. And it is so pitch black. I've never seen this level of darkness while driving. Now, not only is the road windy, potholes, narrow lanes, all this shit, there's literally, you can't see now like instead of 100 feet, 75, 50 feet in front of you because your headlights are all you can see of the road, right? And the reason I say Scottish drivers play with their lives, they're really toying with their shit out here, is because when you're driving on a two-way like road, I'm already nervous. And I see like these guys, they don't care at all for the condition of the road. They're going fucking 60. Where I'm barely, and I like to drive fast, right? I'm not a speed demon, right? That's Andy. That's Andy, my friend Andy. Andy, if you're watching this, you're the fucking speed demon. But I like to drive faster, right? Because I don't like to be a grandma. These motherfuckers, and I was not comfortable with going like the speed limit. These motherfuckers gave no shits. They were driving, if not the speed limit, slightly over on these windy roads. I swear to God, Tokyo Drift, it should have been Scotland Drift. Like, shit was wild over there. Like, these people are just zooming on these tight. I've never like been so petrified of driving in my life. Like, it was terrifying. So we finally get to our Airbnb. It was the most beautiful Airbnb I've ever stayed at. And it's like pitch black outside. We to go in for the night. And just to give you an idea of how like isolated this whole thing is, the town of the Airbnb, like the Airbnb that we were staying at, the town that we were in, again, Staffen, is literally built on a single stretch of road. The entire town is built along this single stretch of road that spans for what I would assume a mile and a half. The whole town. Population has to be less than 1,000 people. Like, I would dare say less than 500 people. Like, it's so fucking small. And there's no restaurants. Nothing. There's one grocery store, and it's the size of a 7-Eleven. Like, literally the size of a 7-Eleven. It's actually insane how small it is, okay? And that grocery store also doubles, funny enough, as a literal fitness community center. All in this building that's like no bigger than your average convenience store. So it's like very quaint and cute. So the whole town is built on this stretch of land. And if you wanted to get like, I asked one of the local guys the next day when we'd woken up from that, finally getting to our Airbnb, we go to like a grocery store and we're getting food just to like eat because, you know, the grocery store. And I asked the guy behind the counter, I'm like, well, where do you, like, are there restaurants here? He's like, nope, no restaurants. There's like 2 and they're only open in the tourist season when people come in. And that's from like June or like May till October. And obviously we had gone in March. So we're not in tourist season, so they're closed. So I go, where do you want to, like, if you want to eat, where do you go? And he's like, oh, we have to drive to Portree. Portree is 30 minutes south of Staffen where we were staying. Imagine being living obviously in New York, you're used to having restaurants like everywhere. Living in most parts of the states that's not like, no, the fucking cow patty country lands of the United States. Like most areas, you have a restaurant within like 5 minutes, maybe, right? These guys had to drive 30 minutes to just get like a bite of food, something to eat that wasn't like made by themselves. It's crazy to me. It's baffling. And there's so many sheep, just, it's amazing. Like, so we stayed, we woke up, our view was amazing. The Airbnb host was incredible because she's a crofter. Her family, this is the most like Scottish last name, the McLeods. They were crofters, right? Shout out to you, the McLeod family, for hosting us. They were crofters, and basically they owned a bunch of livestock, like sheep. So they have like the plot of land that their family owns and runs, and the sheep just frolic and graze or whatever the fuck, do what sheep do. And we had asked them, or they had listed it on their Airbnb that they have like a little sheep experience. So we'd asked them about that. And she had instructed her 9-year-old son, whose name was Lachlan. You kind of mush those C and H together. Lachlan. He told us, like, follow me up the road. He's on his little ATV. We go in our car up the road, like up this mountain to like a little area where it looks like, you know, like a farm, like stable-ish area. It's not like a stable, but it's like, just like there's troughs where animals eat. And all of a sudden, like, we're like, well, okay, so we know we've come to feed sheep, but where the fuck are the sheep? They're not in this little like enclosed area. And he's like, oh, they're over there. Like they're all the way out there. And we look and like maybe 200 yards out, you just see these little like balls of like fluff, these little white clouds just roaming about. And those are the sheep. And I'm going to play the video now, but basically he yells for them. And as you can see in the video, he yells for them. They come and they start like, we're like playing with them. I've never felt something as thick as, sheep's wool. It was amazing. It was incredible. It was so soft. The sheep were friendly, like we were playing with them. It was a very Scottish experience. That whole sheep feeding session, I would say, was probably maybe I think that was like top 3 of moments for me in the trip, because it just kind of felt very special. It's not like a touristy thing, because it's not like it's something you pay for directly. It was like a family who lives in this small ass town in Scotland gave us the privilege of just witnessing them feeding sheep, or the boy did, right? But he was educating us. It's not like it was like he's just throwing like pellets or whatever, oats to these sheep and they're just eating it. He was actually giving us like lessons. Like this sheep is called like a Scottish blackface, which is so funny that they have a sheep called Scottish blackface. I was like, okay. And they have other sheep called like Cheviots or something, and there's like different breeds, and he's telling us all about that. And then he's giving us a history lesson of the local area, because 5 minutes north of like where we were staying was a famous like mountain / landscape called the Kerrang. Sorry if I'm butchering these Scottish pronunciations. The Kerrang, like you roll your R's, it's crazy. And it's a mountain range / like geographical area where, geographically speaking, it's beautiful. Like the mountains are just crazy tall, and you're just exposed to this wild landscape. If you climb the mountain or drive up the mountain, you're exposed to this insane vast landscape of like lakes and bodies of water and little villages that you see out in the distance. It's crazy. So he was explaining to us that they actually, in like 1940 something, the town experienced like something that is like a famous piece of their history, where there were American pilots like scanning the area, flying over the area for whatever reason. And it was a smoky day, like a hazy day. So the visibility was very poor. And obviously this being 1940 something, you don't have all the advanced technology tools that you have in modern day aircraft. So they're flying, and this is a really sad story. There was 11 pilots that were flying in like a squadron, and they were flying low-ish. And the visibility was so poor that they flew directly into the side of the Kerrang, like mountains or cliffs, without even knowing it. And one crashed, and then all of them, the other ones crashed, because they had no idea what was going on. Imagine just like, you're just flying, and you just basically have faith. Like, oh, we're just going in a direction. We don't know what's in front of us. And they happen to be low enough where they flew into the side of a mountain. So he's telling us that crazy story. He's telling us about, Scottish traditions and like what crofters do year round, because we had asked him the night, and I'll also play this clip, the night before, one of the nights while we were in the Highlands, we noticed that there's like this glow that's emanating from over, like we see like, there's a bunch of mountains. We're driving at night, it's pitch black, and we see like a glow coming out from over like the other side of this mountain. We could see like in the sky that there's a glow. And we're like, what the fuck is that? We end up going down the road, because it's on our way back to our Airbnb from where we were exploring that day. And we see that it's like a fire, a land fire, literally just like, it's just the whole side of like this mountain is like on fire, but in like strips. It seemed controlled. So we're like, what the hell is that about? Well, we ask him, and he explains to us that they do this every year or multiple times a year, which is fascinating, because if you're just driving and you see that, it's like, what is happening? Like, this is wild. But now that we're we've been educated. He tells us that in Scotland, they do this thing where they burn this certain plant that grows, and it's very thick and coarse and like harsh, and it prevents good grass from growing on the Scottish landscapes, which again prevents sheep from being able to graze, and cows and shit like that. So they burn it like multiple times, or one time a year. They just burn like a crap ton of this stuff. And what ends up happening is that we're driving, and you could smell from miles around wherever the fires are happening. You smell like barbecue, and for days, like after the fires, the air, it'll just like visibility's ass. It'll just be smoky. Which we lucked out, because it was one of our last days that they started doing that. So we did get to see like, the mountains and stuff like that. But had we gone couple days later, you literally can't see what we saw, like the mountains and the peaks, because of the fact that there's so much smoke from these fires that it just covers them all up. So it was we were very fortunate to be able to go and experience the Highlands to the full extent. While we're driving, we're doing stuff like corny stuff, like playing, the soundtrack of Brave, which was amazing. All while being like, our assholes were all clenched, because then from Scotland, from the Highlands now, at the end of our Highland leg, we end up having to go drive to Edinburgh, whatever, which is a 5.5 hour drive from where we were staying. So it's a long ass drive. And again, it's on these dangerous motherfucking roads. I almost killed us because there was a point probably 3 hours into the journey, 3.5 hours into the journey. We're driving and there's again a fucking curve. It's always these curves. There's a curve, not curbs. There's a curve in the road and I start driving. And what happens right when I get around the curve? You see now this time it wasn't a semi-truck. It was an 18-wheeler going. It was in our lane. Like the front of the 18-wheeler, the front right corner of the 18-wheeler was literally in our lane. So what do? Instead of, and this is why I say Scottish drivers are crazy. Any Scottish driver, if they were in that situation, any local, would have just tweaked the wheel a little bit, not freaked out, and he would have just I'm talking inches of space. He would have been so comfortable with his car that inches of space would have been in between him and the corner of the truck, just past each other. Because I'm not used to driving on that side of the car and I just don't have that spatial awareness, I guess. I got so nervous because I'm like, this fucking truck is going to hit us, that I veered off the lane. I veered off where I was driving a little bit, and the lanes are so tight that because I veered that little bit, now I'm on the side of the road, and I'm talking like I broke and just this hard thump, like a boulder or something hit the bottom, like the undercarriage or the under part of our car. And I was like, well, that just fucked up our car. Thank God it didn't, whatever. But that was like, we almost legitimately died because I thought we were going to crash head on. And I was going pretty fucking fast, like maybe 50 miles per hour on this curve. So I literally thought we had evaded death. So did our friend, and so did Hannah, my girlfriend. So it was crazy. We finally get to Edinburgh, and now this is the part of the trip that is probably top two. I had expected going into this trip that London was going to be my favorite part because it's the biggest city, the most well-known city. There's so much shit to do there, and a lot of people say it's like comparable to New York, right? They're on like similar levels, and I love New York City. So I had assumed that London was going to be my favorite part. Actually, my favorite location of the trip was Edinburgh, because it's a big city, but it's small enough where it feels kind of humble and the people are nice there. Not saying that Londoners were mean, but everyone there is kind of like New York. They just feel like they're in a rush. They're doing their own thing. They don't seem approachable to have a conversation with. Edinburgh was the complete opposite. People were very welcoming. Generally, I observed that people were very welcoming. So did Hannah. So did, our friend that was with us. The architecture in that city was very beautiful. It was gothic and like old. And again, Harry Potter, Hogwarts was based off of, I believe, a lot of Hogwarts was based off of Edinburgh architecture. So you really do feel like you're walking through like a Harry Potter town. It was beautiful. So our hotel was actually, fortunately enough, in the east end of the Royal Mile, which again, if you're not familiar with that area, the Royal Mile is like one of the most famous touristy spots in Edinburgh because it's the stretch of road that leads directly. It runs from like a west to east direction. It runs out of the Edinburgh Castle, just, for a good amount of road east. And our hotel was staying at the very east part of the Royal Mile. So when we got out, our walk to the Edinburgh Castle, it's probably like a 20-minute walk. We were literally just walking through all of these beautiful shops, crazy architecture. We were so fortunate to be staying where we were staying. We picked out a good hotel, and we got it for a great price too. And again, the weather was perfect. And night one in Edinburgh was nuts. So after this 5.5 hour trek journey, we get to where we're staying. We park the car, and that night we're like we hadn't really partied at that point. We had drank a good amount at the Airbnb. We drank Scottish whiskey, obviously, as you have to, or Scotch. And we got super drunk with that. but we didn't like go clubbing or something. So this time we noticed that fortunately enough, we were staying actually right across the street from the University of Edinburgh. And it was a Thursday when we had gotten there. That was our first night. And we noticed that everything in the UK, strangely enough, like closes at, some places close as early as 11, like pubs. Usually around 12, some places go 1. But it's not like a 3 a.m., 4 a.m. city, right? So we're looking for places to go about and do our things, because when we had gone out from dinner and everything, it was 11. So when we had started the night, it was 11. So it was late and everything is closed on the Royal Mile. And we're like, where the fuck do we go? There was like one pub open. We go up to it and its closing time was at 12. So we're thinking, oh, let's just like, get a couple drinks at this pub in this hour. And that's all we'll do for like our first night. And when we're there, we end up striking a conversation with like a local, someone who lived in Edinburgh. She has like the Scottish accent and shit like that. It was awesome. And she informs us that, oh, like the best place to go, like, drink and party and stuff like that, everything around here closes a little bit, and we didn't find it on Google Maps, which is awesome. Like, it wasn't on Google Maps. She was like, it's in the place called Cowgate, which is right off the Royal Mile, but you have to go that way. So as we're walking that way, we start seeing people, more and more people our age, college students, because the lady that we had spoken to was older. And we were looking for like youthful energy, right? Not to say there's anything wrong with like old people or older people, but it's just a different vibe when you're sitting in like a very adult pub versus like a college bar, right? And we're young enough where we have the excuse to try to look for a college bar. We're 23, right? So we're walking and we start seeing more and more people our age. We're like, this is a fucking good sign. We start talking to them. They start directing us, go to this place, go to that place, go to this place. We end up fucking finding ourselves in a club where the entrance to it is down an alleyway that smells like piss. So I'm like, this is it. Like, this is where we're supposed to be. It smells like urine. The end of the alleyway where the entrance is, there's just like fucking 25 young people destroying their lungs and just chain smoking. Like, this is it. Like, this is where we're supposed to be. So we end up going there. We get in, and mind you, it's a Thursday, so like they have school the next day, right? But these fuckers were just going ham. There's people drunk off their ass. We get into the club. It's like a healthy amount of people in the club for a Thursday. The bar is popping. We're drinking. We're like fucking faded. And we're dancing and stuff like that. We get home around like 5 a.m. that night. After eating, after the club, we had gone out and we ate like German doner kebab, pizza, and burgers, which is very American. But, they're not going to be serving fucking haggis or something like that at 3 a.m., which is when we had it. So after eating just drunk food and dancing and drinking a shit ton, we get home to our hotel finally at 5 a.m. and we call it a night. The next morning, I checked another item off my bucket list, and I had Scottish smoked salmon on avocado toast. It was delicious. And then we just went the rest of our day having great stuff, and I had haggis for the first time. Haggis is so much better than I thought it was going to be. A lot of people are very grossed out by the idea of it. I'm here to tell you that it is I'm not a picky eater by any means, so I guess my opinion on this is not as valid just because of the fact that I'll eat anything and everything, and I love trying like, adventurous foods. But a lot of people are grossed out by it because, what haggis is, if you're not familiar, it's literally a sheep's stomach with like all like liver, heart, lungs, I think, and a bunch of organs chopped up, mixed with like spice, like allspice, or I don't know, not like spicy spice, but like seasoning spices like pepper and shit like that, with oats, like oatmeal. You mash it all up, you stuff it in the sheep's stomach, and then you cook it. God knows how. I don't know how the fuck they cook it. I'm not a haggis expert, but that's like the national dish of Scotland, I'm pretty sure, and it's a very traditional thing to eat. So I was like, I have to have this. I had it in Edinburgh, and it was delicious. It was fucking awesome. Colombian people have this thing, it's like blood sausage called morcilla, and it tasted similar to that with a little bit more like bite or like chew. The texture of the meat that was inside, like in the casing, was a little more like, not as like mushy, which I liked. It had like a little more like texture to it. So it was fucking delicious. I loved it. Like, if I could have, looking back, I would have liked to eat more haggis because I only had it twice and they were very small portions. I would have liked to have like a, like a proper, like, if I could have had it my way, just have like a Scottish grandma at her home, just serve me up a straight up fucking stomach just on a plate. And he's like, eat this. I would have loved that. But we only had it in restaurants, so they have to make it look all fancy and put like, whatever, little garnishes and shit on it. So it didn't look as repulsive as I wanted it to, but it was still delicious. And I loved it. From there, we returned to London. And that's that was the end of our trip, and it was so depressing because on the way back to London again, we had to catch a morning flight. We woke up at the crack ass of dawn after 2 days of like having great experiences in Edinburgh. We wake up at the crack ass of dawn at 4:30 to drive to Edinburgh Airport to return the car, and our flight's at 7. Of course, again, we didn't give ourselves adequate time, so we end up getting to the airport, I think at 6. So we have an hour to get onto the plane, and of course, just our luck, we get to the security, and not only, actually, I should mention, before we even got to fucking security, we have to check our bags, right? Our friend did not prepare in advance, so he didn't buy like a checked bag. So he has to check it while we're fucking there. And of course, by some, not miracle, but stroke of bad luck, when we're up at the front, Hannah and I get our bags checked, no problem, because we planned ahead and we bought the stamp for like a check bag early, like before with our tickets. So they just printed the thing, tagged our bags, and sent it on their merry way. Our friend didn't do that. So he's asking for like the stamp or like the tag or whatever. And just as he's about to purchase it, the fucking system, for whatever reason, crashes. They're trying to log on, log off, log on, log off. And we're literally sitting there for 15 minutes. We're like, oh, we're going to miss this fucking flight. Like, there's no way. It's now 6:15. We haven't even gone through security. And our gate is Lord knows how far, because the trend that we had seen up in that till that point, like I said in Gatwick, is that the fucking gates are so far from the initial security area. So we're like, there's no fucking way we're making this flight. It finally gets resolved after 15 minutes because the worker thinks outside the box, and instead of like going on the computer and printing one, he'd already paid for it. So he's like, oh, let me just see if I could check in on like a self-service kiosk or like a kiosk, right? So he uses it and it finally works. He tags his bags. We go. We're sprinting up to security and we're thinking, it's a Sunday, right? It's a Sunday. There's not going to be many people like, traveling at this time of day or on this weekday, this early in the morning out of Edinburgh. Like, we're going to be fine, right? No, not at all. We get to the security gate and it is mobbed with people. Like, I'm talking fucking prime time JFK LaGuardia type foot traffic. Like, there's so many fucking people in front of us. And I'm like, this is just our fucking luck. There's no way in hell we would have made that flight had I not noticed that there was a URL, right? And the worker downstairs, because she'd known that we were very nervous about missing our flight, she told us you could just buy a fast pass online, but she didn't give us a fucking any other direction than that. And I'm like looking now I'm standing in this line like panicking, and I'm like looking for like a fucking URL or something, and I finally see like a sign with like a URL. So I go type it in. I bought us fast passes. We go hop the line, sprint, go through security. It takes a little extra longer because my bag gets taken out of like the little like scanner, my carry-on, because of course they have another rule in the UK where every liquid that, even if it's allowed to be like permitted, like permittable size, you have to take it out and put it in a clear plastic bag. So we're like, oh my God, this is fucking frustrating. So my bag, of course, gets taken out. So it's another hurdle that we have to jump over. I finally get it. I sprint, catch up with my girlfriend and our friend who's like far ahead of us trying to get to the plane. We finally make it to the plane, and again, we're like the last fucking people. We're the last fucking people on this goddamn flight. So we get in, we fly back to London, we land, and now this is where like the drama happens. This is probably the lowest point of the trip, because our friend, who I had not really talked about like in extension during this episode, our friend, let's just call him John for right now. The whole point of this trip was so that Hannah, I was a tag along basically, so that Hannah could meet up with her friends that she'd made on an international program that she did back when she was in college, where she was teaching English to these Japanese students in Japan. So the program basically takes students, college students from top universities around the country, and they go and they sponsor their trip so they could go there and have like an experience in Japan while also working in Japan. So she had met a bunch of amazing people on that trip. Our friend, I believe, let's call him John, because I don't want to use his real name, because I didn't ask him if I could tell this story, but John, she had met on that trip, as well as, two other people who we had met up with in Oxford. Those were the locals that we had known. So the whole purpose of John going on this trip is because one of his best friends, let's call him Bill. Bill is from the UK, and John and Bill met on that program. John wanted to go to the UK to visit and see his friend Bill, which he hadn't seen because of the pandemic and stuff like that, for I would say like 2-3 years, I think he told me. So he was very excited to catch up with him. Well, this is where the drama happens, because while we were in Edinburgh, turns out that John contracts COVID. me and my girlfriend already had Omicron, and there's like an Omicron subvariant or some shit tearing through the UK, like right now as of recording this podcast. Like I literally, like as we landed there and we're driving in the car, a local news like radio station was saying that the numbers in Scotland and in like the rest of the UK are the higher than they've ever been, which is, it seems like that's always what's being reported. Anytime there's like a little flare up in cases, but whatever. So somehow, some way, John ends up getting COVID. Because again, we had planned ahead, Hannah and I had brought at-home testing kits with us. So we noticed one day that John is experiencing he's like, oh, I have allergies, it's whatever. He's not complaining about a fever, headache, chills, none of that. It's just very mild, like sniffles. And he says his throat is like a little raspy, like a little sore. So we noticed that that's going on, and it's like a persistent issue over the course of us being in Scotland. So he had to have gotten it in like the first leg of the trip back in London, because he did stay at a $6 a night hostel. So that's probably where he got it. Anyways, we noticed that that's happening in Edinburgh. So we give him an at-home testing kit. He tests, comes back positive. We're like, fuck. I test, comes back. We only had 2. So I take the second one instead of Hannah, because we'd obviously been together the whole trip. So if I had it, she probably had it. I come back negative. And we'd already scheduled, because you have to have a negative test result to fly back into the country, into the US. So we had already scheduled like a COVID test prior to even landing in the UK. So we're like, if anything happens, we'll just go and see what happens when we get tested at that test. So point of this whole thing is that John's test comes back positive. Now, there's no mandate in the UK to self-isolate, so we didn't break any rules or laws or stuff like that. And you could question the morality of our actions in the comments or whatever, but knowing that he was positive and not really too symptomatic, we had gone out clubbing and stuff like that. But that was probably the case with a bunch of them. Not saying that that makes our actions any better, but I mean, I was negative. That was, whatever. So John goes out. We were like, fuck it. We paid for all this money to go on this trip. We should just go on, he was wearing a mask the whole time. Not that that does a lot, but still. So he's having fun. We get back. He now tells Bill that he's positive. Now, this is where things are like fucked up. Bill actually was supposed to host John in the first leg of our trip because he lives in London. And if you will recall, this whole time I'm telling the stories, I only mentioned that John is with us in Scotland and that John had stayed at a hostel, and John was he was the third person on that trip with me and Hannah in Scotland. Bill was also supposed to be there. But the reason why Bill was not with us, and the reason why John ended up staying at a hostel and was not hosted in London, was because Bill actually contracted COVID like the day before we'd gotten there. So it fucking threw a monkey wrench in our plans. So Bill already has COVID, right? Now you would think, oh, I can't see you because Bill, being in Bill's position, I can't see you because I have COVID. That's a safe, responsible thing to do. I respect that. But John gets COVID. You would think we both have fucking COVID. We might as well just chill. Bill didn't do that. Now, John is supposed to stay with Bill when we get back to London for that last night. And Bill, like, the whole time is being super wishy-washy about this. Now, the reason I'm telling this is because I want you guys to give your opinions in the comments and tell me if this is fucked up, right? Tell me who you think is in the wrong. Bill was supposed to host John for the last night in London, right? And last minute, Bill basically tells him, I can't, no can do. Now, John now has no place to stay in London. And he's walking around with like luggage and literally looking like he's about to sleep in the streets, because we had tried calling hotels and shit like that, asking like, where is there any open rooms? Nothing. There's no place that he can stay. Bill ends up telling John like, I'm sorry, I can't host you. Literally the day of that, we're already in London. Like, if he had told him like 2 days, 3 days prior, even the day before, we could have scrambled and tried to get him a hotel room that night. Nothing. It was the day of. So now places are obviously not going to take him because it's so last minute. And John is now wandering the streets of London in a foreign country by himself, positive with COVID. So is Bill, by the way. He's still symptomatic. But for some reason, he's denying like, oh no, you should self-isolate. Like, I can't host you. And his fucking reasoning was because what if you have a different variant? I want you to tell me if that's fucked up. I thought it was super fucked up because odds of him having a different variant are very slim. And John is actually, funny enough, like a medical student. So he's very knowledgeable in like viruses and stuff like that, or more knowledgeable than any person our age would be, right? Typically. So John explained to us like, this makes no fucking sense because you can't like if I had a different variant, it's not like while we're both sick with separate variants that they're gonna like cross contaminate. Like I can't get sick with two variants at once. That's not the way it works. Like our cells only have enough space to host one virus at a time. Blah blah blah. All this sciencey shit. And I'm like, well, if that's true, which I would assume it is because he's very knowledgeable in that field, that's fucked up. Of Bill. Bill's straight up just leaving his boy. Who the whole reason why John is in this country in the first place is to visit fucking Bill. Now he finds himself in a predicament where he has no place to stay. You tell me if that's fucked up. And the reason why I would speculate this whole thing went down is because homeboy Bill had just gotten a girlfriend, like his first serious relationship in his life. And I kind of see this trend where it's like, and everyone goes through this. I did it too. When you're in your first relationship, you kind of like lose certain parts of yourself. And I think the reason why he was so against it, and he actually said this, I'm perfectly fine with it, but my girlfriend, who he hadn't even been seeing because he was positive, isn't comfortable with it, which is so stupid on her part because she's being controlling and like allowing for Bill to do fucked up things like not host his friend who literally came from a separate country to visit him. So you just tell me if that's fucked up. And that was the last day in London. Was a little sad because the whole day we were just trying to help him out. And he finally found a place to stay at an Airbnb because Bill had provided him, funny enough, with an Airbnb. Like, here, I found, see, it's not that hard. Like, the whole time, by the way, John is messaging Bill like, dude, I really can't find a place to stay. This is fucked up. Like, help me out, please. He's like literally being very vulnerable, saying like, dude, this is really hard on me. Like, I'm stressed out. I can't find any place to stay. I'm really scared that I'm going to have to sleep in the streets. And Bill's being a dick. Like, he's straight up just like LOLing him. Like, it's not that bad. Try to see the positive in this, but not COVID positive. Like, making jokes and shit like that, like in a really stressful time for John. And Bill ends up suggesting, why don't you go to this Airbnb? And he sends him the place. Obviously, he doesn't tell him where the fuck it is or where he found it. And John was just very trusting and booked it. Turns out the Airbnb was an hour and 15 outside of London. So it's in the suburb, like far out. And you're like, oh, that's not that bad. Just take public transit. Of course, just our luck. There were major like mechanical scheduled maintenance like sessions that day. So most of the major public transit lines that were running in the underground in London, all this shit, were done. They were closed for the day. So there was no way for him to get from where we were to where the Airbnb was, an hour and 15 outside the city, via public transit. Not even by bus, because the buses were all rearranged because of the crazy maintenance scheduled maintenance that the lines were undergoing. So he ends up having to pay fucking $70-$80 for an Uber all the way out there. Now he's stressed. He leaves, like, we said bye to each other early on our last day because he was so stressed. He just had to get to the Airbnb and just hunker down and figure out what the fuck he was going to do for the night because he had to then isolate for 5 days, before he could fly back into the country. And just like all this shit, all these hurdles he had to jump through because he was positive for COVID before being able to fly back into the US. So he was just like, I'm just going to call it early today. Like at 4, I'm going to get there and figure out, like, plan ahead and try to figure out what the fuck I'm going to do with this, like, housing and like what I'm going to do. So we're like, man, sorry to hear that. So John goes. And now Hannah and I are like exhausted because we had 3 hours of sleep the night before. We had traveled the whole day and now we were running around frantically trying to help John find a place to stay because, in my opinion, Bill was being an asshole. But again, let me know in the comments. And what ends up happening is we end up just shopping and we're exhausted. Again, walking zombies. But this is the highlight of that day. We end up going for dinner for a place that we were recommended called Flatiron in Soho. I think it's in Soho. It's in central London somewhere. And Flatiron is probably one of the most unique restaurants I've ever been to. It's a steak restaurant, right? And they serve like a particular cut. I can't remember what the cut is for the life of me, but they serve a cut of steak. And it was such a unique experience because we were recommended this restaurant by locals, like London locals who we had befriended on our way to Oxford, like in the very beginning of the trip, on the public line to go to Oxford on the train. There were a couple sitting behind us, and we had just by happenstance like struck up conversation with them, and then we started asking them, give us things to do, blah blah blah, and they suggested Flatiron. So on our last day, Hannah and I make it a point to go there. We go up and it's an hour wait or an hour and 15 wait. We're like, fuck it, we'll wait. So they give us like they tell us to give us their number, give them give them our number, Jesus. So we give it to them. We then go and start finding things to do to kill the time while we're waiting for this table to clear up. So we end up going to a pub. I get a gin and tonic and a beer, right, for me and Hannah. So we start drinking. We get shit-faced because we're on empty stomachs and we've just been walking all day. So where there's nothing in our system, we're just drinking alcohol. And we're like buzzed. We start reminiscing about the trip. It was a super, not to be mushy-gushy, like romantic moment. It was super nice. And then while we're like a nice level of drunk, we get the text. So we fly over to Flatiron. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's such a unique restaurant, right? The steak was amazing, but the price of the steak was the thing that really set it over the top. It's not like Ruth Chris, if you're familiar with that restaurant. It's not like grade A fucking steak. It's very good steak, right? Not like the top like steakhouses, like American steakhouses, but it's very good steak. But it was $12 for like a very decent portion. I would say 6, maybe 8 ounces of steak. $12 for 8 ounces of amazing steak. Tender as fuck, juicy. It's crazy. Hannah had ordered the steak, but when I was there, I wasn't really interested in getting the steak for whatever reason, so I ended up getting a burger. And this is the fucking reason I wanted to mention this restaurant. What is the fucking food that the U.S. is known for the most? It has to be, in my opinion, it would have to be like burgers, right? Everyone, foreign people, their views on us, it's like Americans just fucking eat burgers all the time. And they're kind of right? Like burgers, I would think is an American thing. If that's the case, tell me why I had the best burger I have ever had in my life in London. Tell me why. I had such an issue with that. I was so bothered by this because it's like my national pride is like hurt. It's like, imagine if some random country that's not even known for their food, like, I don't know, fucking Norway or whatever, like Norway's not known for their food, right? Imagine if Norway ended up having better sushi than you would have in Japan and you were a Japanese person. You'd be like, what the fuck? They're doing something better in this like country or area that's not known for food. They're not known for that. They're doing this better than we are, and we are the inventors and creators of this shit. Like, what the fuck is going on, right? So, or like, we're known for it. America's known for burgers. Why, as an American, am I finding the best burger that I've ever had in London? Now you're probably thinking, oh, you just haven't had good burgers. Again, I live in fucking New York. There's like some of the best food in the world is found in New York. And I've eaten many a burger in New York and around the country. Florida, wherever I've been in the country. Fucking just, I haven't been like to every state, obviously. And I haven't even been to the West Coast. But all over the East Coast. Pennsylvania. I drove to Florida, so like pit stops in North Carolina. I've had burgers like in a decent amount of fucking places in the U.S. Tell me why the best burger I've ever had is in fucking London. And it's not even because it's like it's like, it was so good in its simplicity. Usually a lot of the times in the US, a trend that I've seen lately is that burgers in like these real like diners or whatever, there'll be an overwhelming amount of ingredients in the burger. Like there'll be fucking onion rings, cheese, mozzarella sticks, an egg, avocado, lettuce, tomato, onion, fucking fries, just like piled onto this burger, and it ends up being like too much. There's too many flavor profiles conflicting with one another, and it's good. It's still good. It's amazing. But the thing I liked about this burger was the fact that it was so simple. It was literally just a really tender fucking good patty, right? With, I think, a brioche bun, and then it was like caramelized onions, melted cheese, tomato, shredded lettuce, mayonnaise, and then like special sauce. So less than 10 ingredients. And it was fucking phenomenal. Like, I took a bite out of that shit and I looked up across the table at Hannah and I'm like, why is this the best burger I've ever had in my life? All dramatic like that. And I thought I was tripping. Like, maybe I'm just drunk or whatever. Hannah was less drunk than I was. She was not even drunk. Like, she was tipsy. And I'm like, I need to confirm that this is this good. So I'm like, can you please try a bite of this? She tasted. She's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, that shit was crazy. So that was the best fucking way to end the last night in the UK trip in London. So after that meal, we just went back to the Airbnb where we were staying at, woke up the next day, flew back. And that's it. That's the whole UK trip. If you've been here for the entirety of this episode, thank you so much for listening. It means a lot. Your boy's trying to grow this platform, this podcast, and I'm like, looking at analytics and stuff like that, and very few people make it to the end. So if you are one of the select few of my subscribers, if you're happen to be a random listener, be sure to like and subscribe. There's new episodes every week. But yeah, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for making it. I hope this story or this recap of this trip was entertaining for you. And again, please fucking let me know if you think the whole Bill and John situation, who is in the right, who's in the wrong, your thoughts on it. I love to hear that, because it's kind of, you could see both sides. Like, you don't want to get infected. You don't want to, whatever. And COVID as it is a very tricky thing, especially in the US. Shit gets political and there's a lot of different beliefs that are tied into it. But just let me know what you think. Who's in the right, who's in the wrong. And yeah, so just thank you so much for listening. It's been a long episode, especially for me being by myself. I'll have guests on, because I love doing podcasts with like my friends and stuff like that. So I'll have more guests on. You won't just be seeing podcast episodes of just me talking to the fucking camera, boring, the crap out of you. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, cue the outro music. Thank you for watching. Peace.